Welcome back, y'all. I'm Rowan the Optimist. We rockin'. Today is a crazy day. This type of video is like the main reason why I start this channel. My Christian journey to deconstructing, and now I would identify as like atheist now, I would say, pretty strongly on that. This type of video, I've been thinking about this video for a lot, just like the two main reasons why I've deconstructed from Christianity specifically. And we here. I guess just a little background. So I didn't really grow up from ages like, 5 to, like 16, or just like growing up. My family never did like anything with like church or anything. But then when I was 17, I went through like a really bad breakup, it was just like a really hard time in my life, just like a nihilistic teenage phase, in my life. And I knew my grandparents went to church, so I was like, you know what, let me try it. I heard about, you hear about it when you grow up in America, and there's a church around every corner, and you hear about how it can help you in those types of situations. So I started to go. At the time, the message really resonated with me. It's what I really needed to hear at the time. And it did help temporarily. I think that first like 6 month to a year period of Christianity it can be very beautiful. It can be really cool. Just the general power. I do think there's just things that could also do that just aren't religion, but that is what helped me kind of get out that phase. It happened to be religion. It could have been something else possibly, but that was my journey. You know what I mean? But I will always appreciate like that phase of like Christianity for getting me out of like that like kind of nihilistic slump and life not going like too well. Always appreciative. But once you start kind of getting more into it, then, so as a year, so now I'm 21, so about 17, 21, I was a Christian, so that's, 4 years, and getting pretty dedicated. I love Jesus, man. Like, we had, it was a very close relationship, prayed, studying his word. I saw it as just like, it's me and Jesus. Like, I didn't, getting with the church was always kind of hard for me. I did kind of towards like the last couple of years, like this last year, I got like more like into the church aspect. But for a while, it was just like I saw it as kind of like it's not a religion, it's a relationship kind of mentality. And yeah, man, I love Jesus, man. It's still sometimes it's still hard. It's cool. It's cool having that just like that optimistic source. That kind of just like person in your life, what that you make. But unfortunately, it just is, whether it's a delusion or not, but as obviously I think it's kind of delusional now in my position, but always appreciate that. And me and this concept of Jesus, or my concept of Jesus, were very close. It was very cool for a little bit. But then, we start getting into the Bible and everything, and it's just been this year. I always heard so many arguments. You hear like the atheist argument, and I started getting into like apologetics and stuff. So I had my faith. I was going to church. I loved it. Loved the worship and all the church. Dude, this video is gonna be everywhere. I'm so sorry. Just to get it out the way too. Yeah, I just also want to make the point, like, nothing bad happened with anyone. Nothing bad happened with God. Nothing bad happened in my life. Nothing bad happened at the church. I've had a great church experience. Shout out, my pastor and the people at my church. Nothing, the worship is cool. The sermon, when I believed in the sermons were great to hear. I got nothing against, believers in my family or at my church or anything. I got nothing against God. I don't hate God or anything. I'm just not convinced of his existence. It's that simple. But yeah, no, nothing bad has happened in my life to make me like diverse. Not like a prayer didn't get answered. Life's been really dope. Life's actually been really cool. I'll tell you, this is like one of the best years one of the best times of my life that I've had. You know, I got my own place now. I'm chilling. I'm making music. I'm able to. Life has just gotten kind of better ever since I deconverted. Honestly, just like way more free thinking. I can listen to any music that I want. So life is actually dope. Life has been dope. So yeah, nothing bad happened. Just I've just lost my faith, and I've deconstructed, and I'm just not convinced of God, which is pretty much the definition of atheism. Is just you're not convinced of God's existence. You don't say there's a God or not a God. It's just I'm just not convinced. At least right now. That's subject to change though. So yeah. Just want to throw that. Just want to get that one off. That nothing bad has happened. But yeah. So. But you start to go in the process, but then I start to get, I guess to just show how like dedicated it started to get. So, you know, one for my own personal journey, I'm just going to church and stuff. But then, you know, you get online and you start seeing arguments. Then I started getting really passionate about like apologetics, like Christian apologetics. And I went hard on this, bro. I went hard. I was reading the Bible. I was following all the apologists, you know, all the famous ones. I liked like William Lane Craig. I like C.S. Lewis. I like Cliff Knechtle. I liked all the apologists. Mike Winger. Who else is there? I haven't been in that space in a minute. It's been a couple months. But you know, all the apologists, all the famous ones. I watched them. Yeah, that was really my mission. I really wanted to destroy. I really wanted to tackle like atheism. I wanted to spread the gospel to everyone. I thought the gospel's the truth, and you know, people are on a bad road. They're going to you know, like a hell reality. They're going to be separated from God. I need to convince people, you know. So I went down that route. And in this journey, so yeah, I was trying to become the best Christian I could possibly be. And in this journey, though, going over the Bible and going over certain arguments and certain answers, slowly seeds of doubt actually kind of sprung from this process as I started to inquire more about God. You know, I put my faith in him. You know, I got baptized. I gave my life to Jesus. And then it was like, okay, now I'm going to go into it. Now I'm going to really like dive in, which is not what you should do. This is not right. You should research something first and then get into, but that's kind of, religion does kind of have this like unique aspect of like, you get that emotional draw first, you know, you're in this bad spot and then it brings you to it first. And then you kind of dive more, maybe inquire more intellectually about it later kind of thing. Which is interesting, but you shouldn't do this with other stuff. Don't do that. Don't do that. Research first. So yeah, I started to dive more into it, and yeah, came across like debate. I guess I'm just trying to think. It's so hard. I don't think there was that. I do have a video where there was just like a night in my room, in this room, where I was kind of pacing back and forth. I'm watching a bunch of like atheist kind of videos, and I just turned on this camera. And I just started kind of, at one point I started like crying, and I'm just like, I kind of like denounced my faith. I kind of just explained what I was thinking. I kind of explained that like, you know, maybe I'm just not a Christian anymore. I don't think I believe in this stuff. So I don't know if, so I do have that one moment on camera, but I think it was a bunch of stuff leading up to it. It's like a crack in a dam, and you know, that crack just slowly widens and gets ever so wider, you know what I mean? It's not just like one drop of water that like makes the crack bigger, you know. It's a, you know, a gradual process of the dam's crack getting bigger, and then eventually, I think that night that I recorded that's kind of when the dam like broke open. So yeah, that's kind of the background. Basically, try to become the best Christian I could. And it kind of backfired, and we'll get into that. And so, yeah, I guess starting off with reason one, enough talking, let's get into the reasons. Reason one, if I had to summarize it, is just simply, we'll just start with the Bible itself. This is like the inspired word of God. I'll give the typical like Protestant interpretation, and that's where I came from. I happened to go to like a Methodist church. I never identified as Methodist, but I identified more like just like general Protestant, even though that's a whole spectrum. But yeah, from the general Protestant, God, the Bible is the inspired word of God. Some even believe in sola scriptura, where the Bible's word is like the final authority on things, and the Bible is the authority, which is kind of crazy to me, because like how do you authenticate anything? Like if you just throw out like church history and stuff and like all of that, like you have to think like how did those words get there in the first place? And just so say sola scriptura is crazy, but that's a whole nother thing. But yeah, it's generally like it's a univocal. The Bible has been inspired by the same God from Genesis to Revelation. It's the same God. It's Jesus in the New Testament. It's Jesus in the Old Testament. It's it's all one voice. It's all the prophets they're not. No one has a different message. No one has a different will. It's all the same voice coming from the same source. I have to push back on this, and I just don't see this. So yeah, I don't see this. I see a more kind of inconsistent message. I see contradictions, and I see general just like very immoral, very, very messed up, like immoral verses that I don't know can be explained. And they're immoral on any stand. They're obviously immoral from my stand. I'm a secular humanist, I would say. That's kind of the position I'm taking. A general trying to promote well-being for every human and flourishing, right? So that's my stance. So obviously it's immoral from that stance. And then I think it's immoral from what does kind of, obviously it contradicts with what God commands in certain parts, but there are times where God is portrayed as like condemning murder in some cases and certain like evil acts. So it even condemns the standard that's like set by God, but then he like breaks the commands, which is an interesting concept. Maybe he is just to do that if he is real. But that's like a whole nother thing to get into, but yeah, we'll get into it. So yeah, inconsistency and contradictions. So I guess we'll start with a contradiction that I see. This is one I don't see people talk about much, but this one to me is just like, it's the most like mutually, like both claims can't be true at the same time. They're mutually exclusive. Like here's premise A is saying this conclusion, premise B is saying this conclusion, and they don't match at all. And it says in 1 John chapter 1, verse 5. All right, here's the verse. So 1 John 1:5. This is the message we have heard from him and proclaimed to you, that God is light, and in him there is no darkness found at all. So keep that in mind. I'll put it on the screen. No darkness found at all. And please like read these books, like everything that I'm about to quote, obviously for sake of the video, I'm just going to pull like a verse, but please like go read the actual like context and everything. And even like the whole book, if you can, like read all 1 John, and I'm about to quote Isaiah. Try, read these books, get the context. Like don't take stuff out of context, like get the context. And the context for this is simply, the author is just describing, it's just an attribute of God. He's just making a statement about God. There's nothing really too much. It's just you can start, just start from the beginning, and please tell me if I'm wrong. This is just a general statement about God is really the context. So we have that. This message we heard. So remember that there. God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. Okay, remember that. All right. Okay, now we got Isaiah 45, chapter 45, verse 7. We got, okay, let's start. I am the Lord, and there is no other. I form the light and create darkness. I make, my translation says, weal and create woe. Some say evil and calamity, or goodness and calamity. I, the Lord, do all these things. I'll read that again. I form the light and create darkness. I make weal and create woe. I, the Lord, do all these things. Okay, so this is interesting. So we got this verse, we got 1 John saying there's no darkness found in him, none, zero. Okay, then we got this verse saying, I, the Lord, create darkness. Okay, this just, you know what I mean? This has been very, I would really like to hear like explanation. And please like read Isaiah, read the chapter, read this chapter and the book. I'm finishing Isaiah, obviously. I just have a couple chapters left. There's a lot of context to give on this, but this is just a general, like, it just is what it kind of sounds like. It's just God making, it's the Lord speaking through, it's Isaiah the prophet speaking for God, obviously, and he's also describing God the same way that John is kind of doing. John was describing God in his verse, and this is kind of Isaiah doing it too. He's describing God. He's describing what God does and what he doesn't, and what he is and what he isn't, you know what I mean? It's pretty much that simple, but please go read it yourself. Yeah, so this is, I see this as a pretty big problem. You know, you have two versions of God here in the same book that's supposed to be univocal. It's very confusing. I just don't get it. Because how can this God, if there's no darkness found in him, but over here in Isaiah it's saying, you know, he creates darkness, how can this entity create something without having that component itself, right? How can you create evil without having the component of evil in you, right? If you have no component of evil in you, there's no way you could be able to create evil, if that makes sense. It's God sends spirits all the time, evil spirits specifically. God sends evil spirits to people all the time. He sent it to Saul, which is a whole other thing. He sent it to King Saul. I think in Judges, he sends spirits. I forget the context. He sends evil spirits all the time. So that's confusing. That's like the number one contradiction for me. You got this thing saying he's all light, and you got this thing saying he creates darkness. So it's, I don't know. Or it's like saying there's no darkness in him, and then you got this thing over here saying he creates darkness. So it's like, which is it? Both can't be true. One really quick, I'll just throw a New Testament. I'm not going to go like too much on it, but one that's really confusing, and I've tried to do research on it, but there's no answers that are very sufficient for me. But you got Matthew's account and Luke's account of where Mary and Joseph go after Jesus is born. You know, I forget if it's Matthew or Luke. One says they flee to Egypt, right? And the other says they stay in Bethlehem or stay in Jerusalem, pretty much. Go read it yourself. Bart Ehrman actually has a really interesting exercise. Is just like read the Gospels and just write down what happens. Just every time like something happens, like an event, just write it down and then compare it to each other. And you'll be very surprised stuff. And I'm learning more about this, and I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to steel man the other position, trying to understand if it was possible. Maybe they went to Egypt and Bethlehem, they went to Egypt and Jerusalem, or whatever it is. But that is one I would look into. I think on the surface, as it reads, it is a pretty blatant contradiction. You know, one, they're describing the same event, but yeah, in one story, they go to one place, and another story, they go to another place. So it's like, it's confusing. It's confusing. I guess with the contradictions too, like, I wouldn't expect this, if this is truly like the inspired word of God, like the entity that rules over this universe and who created us. I wouldn't expect contradiction. Yeah, so now we'll get into verses that more confused me and kind of started getting the gears rolling, and that I still don't think there's any sufficient answer for. And this is more like a moral verses. Go read, so we'll start with the one that first got me is Exodus 21, just the whole chapter. When a slave owner strikes a male or female slave with a rod and the slave dies immediately, the owner shall be punished. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's a good rule. Yeah. Rather just not the slavery, but hey, okay, fair enough. 21 says, But if the slave survives a day or two, there is no punishment, for the slave is the owner's property. Okay. Now this is tough. I wrote a whole thing on Exodus 21. I have like a whole like synopsis on it that maybe I could link to or something. But yeah, this whole there's other crazy stuff in here too. The first couple verses talk about, you know, it's and this is the rules for specifically like Hebrew slaves. Yeah, the first, you can like get their daughter, you can get their wife under slavery. Just go read Exodus, and especially Exodus 21. But yeah, this is like the slavery chapter, and you know it's confusing. You know, why is God allowing any sort of slavery in any sort of manner at all? And especially that, and then if people say, you know, in 16, I'll grant it, verse 16 in this chapter says, like, you're not allowed to, like, kidnap them. It's like, okay, cool, well, okay, so you can't kidnap them, but you can still buy them or acquire them in a appropriate way according to the text, and you can beat them. You can beat them so bad where they can recover for 2 days, and as long as they don't die, you're chilling. No, there's no punishment, and it's because they're your property, so they're looked at as like subhuman. You know, typical. There's much more qualified people who can break down like Exodus and the slavery in the Bible and stuff. But obviously, this is kind of where I hope you understand from where I'm coming from. It looks bad, you know, and this is God's commandment. And there's just, I see no way to justify it. You know, people might say, you know, Jesus came to undo all this, and I just disagree. Jesus, it's in Matthew 5:17. Jesus says, like, don't think I came to abolish the law. I came to fulfill it, to every like jot and tittle. So, I think Jesus himself says like he didn't come to change the law. And also too, if you believe this is like if you believe in like the Trinity and that this God and Jesus are the same, you have to admit that, or at least the wills, like maybe it's a different person, but I hope you would agree as a Christian that Yahweh's will and Jesus's will align. That's why Yahweh loves Jesus so much, right? Their wills have to align. So why is there a different will? So why would this God, the Father, Yahweh, have one will about slavery, but then Jesus has a whole another will about slavery, about how it should be free? And I don't even think that's true. That's me granting it. Let's just grant that like Jesus was anti-slavery, which I don't even know. I don't think you can make the case. There's never an explicit point where Jesus or the Bible says like do not own another human. It's vaguely alluded to, and I think it's very weak. I don't think it's ever reconciled. In fact, I think it's almost promoted. Go read. I'll pop it up. It's Ephesians 6:5. Jesus says something along the lines of slaves, obey your masters, good or bad, like obey your masters and stuff. So it's confusing, man. That one's confusing. Why are we condoning slavery? You know, I don't know. I just couldn't, and I used to defend this, you know, when I was a Christian, like apologist kind of route, you know, I used to say there's certain things. I used to say, like, it's not the same type of slavery, or it's like a different type of slavery, but that kind of gets torn down when it literally says, like, their property and they get beat, or I would say, like, they're servants, but it's like, okay, do you think it's okay to beat your servants? Like, it doesn't matter if they're slave or servant, they're getting beat either way, and their wife and kids are being captive forever, so it's confusing, and I don't see that point. What else did I say? One time I was in like a debate and someone said like this was the most like progressive slavery laws. That I don't get. Koda Hammurabi was actually, so in the beginning of this chapter, it says, when you buy a male Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years, but if in his 7th he shall go free, right? In the Koda Hammurabi, you only had to serve like 3 years, right? So I would say I would take Kota Hammurabi, and this predates Exodus. So that's just not true. These were not progressive laws at all. They were the same, if not worse, if not worse. So that's like a moot point. Let's jump to other verses that disturb me. I got Deuteronomy. This book is ridiculous, bro. This book is absolutely ridiculous. We jump to 21:10 and onward, like 21:10, chapter 21, verse 10 to verse 14. This is an instruction on how if you wanted an enemy's soldier's wife, how to take them captive and how to make them your wife. You know, you can go read it. Lot to unpack here. So this is nuts. I mean, this is crazy. You know, this is a command from the Lord God. You know, this is how, if you see, it said it right there, you know, if you see a woman beautiful that you find beautiful amongst the captives from like this war, you can take them. It shows you it tells you what to do. You know, shave her head, cut her nails, and not one point is the woman's consent asked. What if she doesn't want to go with the situation? So some people might say like, oh, you're giving her like a better situation, but what if? I don't think she wants to go. I think because the opposite option is pretty much death. Like if a woman refused to go, I imagine they'd probably be dead in this war situation. So of course they're gonna become this person's wife, not by consent, but out of survival. It's very similar. It would be like in concentration camps. Women in Nazi Germany time, there's stories of women who would like pinch their cheeks to make them pink, so they would look more. They wouldn't look as like they're dying, and so the German soldiers wouldn't like shoot them pretty much, because if you looked like you were dead, like pretty much, then the German soldiers would just kill you, right? So that's what some women would do, is like pinch their cheeks to make them rosy, like so they look more youthful and like alive, right? You can't imagine. Now imagine if one of these soldiers said to the women in these concentration camps, hey, I won't kill you if you marry me, pretty much. Or if you marry me, you won't have to like suffer, like I'll take you home and you'll be like safe, right? Just because one of those women might take that German soldier up on that offer doesn't mean that they are consenting to it. They are trying to just survive. If it was their will, if it was the most ideal situation or a ideal situation, they would not just be with the soldier at all. They wouldn't be in the concentration camp at all. So that's something that's very confusing about this verse, or it's just like not confusing. It's just like kind of disgusting, or just like kind of something I find just immoral. These women just have no choice. They get taken captive, and they get their head shaven. They get their nails cut. What if they don't want their head shaven? You know, all bodily autonomy gets violated with this, and it really sucks to see. It's really terrible. Yeah. So I just don't see how a moral good God, it's unlikely that a moral good God would be advising this sort of law. Yeah, so that was definitely something that got me. This is, and please, especially this chapter, read this whole chapter. It's the very next chapter. We got Deuteronomy 22, verse 28. Basically, the context of this is just like what to do in this specific situation. And yeah, read this whole chapter, but I'm just going to 28, basically. If a man meets a virgin who is not engaged and seizes her and lies with her, and they are caught in the act, the man who lay with her shall give 50 shekels of silver to the young woman's father, and she shall become his wife. Because he violated her, he shall not be permitted to divorce her as long as he lives. Okay, so this is interesting. If a man meets a virgin who is not engaged and seizes her and lies with her, okay, he has to pay. So basically, and it's really bad. So a couple verses, like 2 verses before it, basically, So this is all about like what to do in certain situations if a man rapes a woman, and it's all dependent on the status of the woman and her marriage. So before it says, you know, if you rape a married woman, essentially, you are to be put to death, right? But if you rape a virgin woman, you just, all you have to do is just pay her dad 50 shekels. That's it. Because male pride was like such a big thing with these verses, and it was just basically about offending like a man. Like if you raped another man's wife, right, that's super dishonorable and that's super offensive to the other man, right? So you got put to death. But if you rape a virgin woman, you have to ask yourself, which man are you dishonoring? And then it's like her father, right? That's the only man you're dishonoring. So of course, then the punishment is you pay her father specifically 50 shekels, right? It's not about the women. The women are a second thought. It's all about the men. It's all about how do the women affect it's just how do these things affect the man's pride and honor. So if you rape someone's virgin daughter, right, that's super dishonorable. So that's why you pay 50 shekels. So yeah, this one's really messed up. I'm just going to let that one sit. Yeah, it's these things, and these are the law. Yeah, I think it's Deuteronomy chapter 5. I'll try to find it, but it says, you know, these laws are to be followed forever, and Jesus upholds that. So it's rough, man. It's rough. Those ones, and then just a quick one. Go read Numbers 31, chapter 31, all the way, and read all of Numbers. But Numbers 31, verse 17, basically Moses is commanded by God to go kill a race called Midianites, and yeah, they're told to kill the men, the women, the infants, and to take the virgin women captive for themselves. If they see virgin women that they like, take them is what the Lord commanded for Moses. So that one's pretty rough. And there's a lot like that. There's a lot thinking. Saul's whole story is about that, but I'm gonna talk about that another time. But yeah, that's like the first part. That's the Bible. And I didn't even go into stuff that deep, but that'll probably be for other videos. But yeah, that's like the number one reason is the Bible itself is just very inconsistent. I see a lot of very unethical morals, basically, and this is supposed to be the inspired word of God. Oh, bruh. My ass fell asleep. That's why it's dark. Oh my goodness, bruh. Yeah, I just like laid my head down for a second. I was getting tired. Oh my goodness gracious. But anyways, man, I think I was on the second reason. Let's just get right back into it. All right. Second reason why I've deconstructed is because we live in a reality where there's gratuitous or there's unnecessary suffering, essentially, right? I get a reality where maybe there's a little bit of suffering, maybe we still could experience grief to like grow and stuff. I understand that. Like, I guess a good example is like a parent might subject their child to the dentist, you know, and the kid might get kind of hurt, you know, the dentist is prodding the child's teeth with like sharp objects, and the kid is, you know, kid's probably like in agony, but it's, you know, we accept this idea because this is going to lead to something good. There's going to be a good outcome to this. The child's teeth is going to be like fixed, and down the line in their life, this is a net positive benefit. So it makes sense. They're going through a little bit of suffering now, and they're going to reap good rewards, and the parent is allowing that. It's like, okay, fine. That makes sense. Like that, I have no problem with that. Like there are some situations where like you suffering does lead to a good outcome, and the suffering isn't that bad in the grand scheme of things. I think a lot of Christians I hear too use like the gym example. Like, you know, you literally put your body through pain, and then you grow and you get healthier and you get more muscles. It's like, okay, fine, sure. But where this analogy and kind of thinking falls apart is our reality. where there's unnecessary suffering and unjust suffering. For example, one statistic I keep in the back of my head is like every single day on average, about 10,000 kids, just kids, starve to death every day on this planet. This is completely preventable for God. This is completely unnecessary. Starving to death is also like a really terrible way to go out. It's very painful. The kids are, I think it's unjust. I'll try to avoid saying innocent. But in my opinion, they're completely innocent. I know it's at least unjust, It seems unjust. I don't see what maybe these kids could do. I don't think it's a situation where like they did something and now this is happening. I think there's circumstances in the world, and I hope we can agree on this. Like there's circumstances in the world where someone good / innocent is having just like completely unjust suffering happening to them, such as like these kids, or like child sex. Like there's children being like sex trafficked from like since they've been like 9 and stuff. It's like they didn't do anything. They're innocent. So yeah, this is a big problem. This is a big philosophical problem to me. If you have a good and just God per se, why is he letting these things happen? Because he has, I guess, what's a good reason for letting this happen, and why is he not intervening to fix it? And that's kind of the sub also reason I've left, is God not intervening when it seems right. So for example, with these kids starving to death, he in Exodus, when the Israelites were coming out of Egypt into the desert for 40 years, he rained down food on them. He gave them bread, and I think at one point he rained down like meat, like a bunch of meat. So it's like God has the ability to rain down food. He had the ability to make us different. I say, like, he could have made us get our food from photosynthesis. We could have been like plants where we just get our food from the sun and stuff. Could have done that. Could rain down food. Many options. He's God. This is God we're talking about. He could do many things. There's a possibility. And then you wouldn't have these thousands of deaths, just these completely unnecessary deaths. You know what I mean? So that's one. And then with the trafficking not intervening, so imagine you walking in. If I ever walked in on like a child or a family member being sexually assaulted and I had the power, I would do everything in my power to stop the suspect, or to stop the person from doing that, right? Even if I think I'd lose, but that's not even relevant, because God can destroy like anyone. Apparently he has the power. So yeah, imagine walking into a room, you can stop like a child from being sexually assaulted, and you don't, right? That would be messed up. Or at least like call the police or something. You do something, you know what I mean? So it's like, why would you intervene on that situation? But God didn't intervene, because not only did you like have to walk in on it and know it's happening, God knows that it's happening. He knows everything that's happening in the world. He knows it's happening and is not stopping it right now. If I could stop a child right now from being sexually assaulted, I would beat up whoever, call the police, whatever I have to do. I just don't know. I don't know where it's happening. And I don't know how to stop it exactly, but God does know this, so why doesn't he? And this is completely unnecessary. I would like to know what good is going to happen from situations like this. What good is going to happen from a random kid starving to death, or a random kid getting sexually assaulted? Like, what is the possible good that can come out of this? If we compare it to the dentist analogy, right? The kid could see like better teeth and a better quality of life, right? But with this other stuff, what better possibility could they see? You might say like compensation of heaven, but I just think this is an inadequate answer. And compensation doesn't automatically just like forgive everything. There's still much wrong being done, and it undermines the suffering of the people around them, kind of thing going. I'll try to touch more on that later if I remember, or in some other time. But another point, what else I want to get to? And then possible rebuttals for this. So obviously people will say like, well, we have free will. So yeah, I want to get some like apologetics. 'Cause I know the Christian apologetics. Trust me, it's not like I'm going into these like I'll say like I'm confused or like I don't know the answer, but like I've heard the answers. I know the Christian I was a Christian apologist. Like I gave answers to these. I remember answering these type of questions. I just want to pose it more from like my view now, but just I want to address some of the Christian apologetic answers. It's basically one, they'll just like free will, just say free will pretty much. This here's my pushback on the free will thing to this. It's one, here's just the first thing with the sexual assault. So are you saying the abuser's free will is more important than the trauma and suffering that's being inflicted onto like the child, let's say, who's getting like sexually assaulted? Like why is free will held to this highest of high right that like humans have when I just don't see how that's like justified. Like screw that guy's free will if he's doing something so bad, you know what I mean? I just don't get why abuser's free will is more important than a child's like suffering. To me, the child's suffering should come over that. That's just number one. Number two is, why can't we live in a world where God intervenes and there's free will? This can totally make sense. This isn't like a logically contradicting stance of the world. You can totally have this. If I were to go like rob a bank, right? I decide on my own, I'm gonna go rob a bank. If the police stop me, they did not take away my free will. And I hope you wouldn't say that. I went to go do it. It was my choice. I knew the consequences, right? And then the police simply just stopped me. Just because there's consequences of something doesn't mean there wasn't any free will to do it. There was a chance I could have gotten away with it. There was a chance. I just got caught. You know what I mean? My free will was not affected at all. I had the choice to stop at any time. I could have decided I'm going to rob it. At the last second, I could have said, no, I'm not going to do it. And then at the last second, I could say, no, let's just go do it. You know what I mean? I could have done this infinite amount of times and then ultimately decide to rob it. And then I get caught or I don't get caught. You know what I mean? But if I get caught, it doesn't mean my free will was violated. I had the choice to do it. So in the same way, God could be like the best police officer ever. He knows when stuff is going to happen, and he could stop. He could even let someone like begin to kind of do something, but then only let them go for like 5 seconds and then just like stop it right there. I don't know how that would work, but hopefully he would just stop it before the evil happens in the first place, right? And how he could do, I don't know, he could send like an angel. Maybe he sends Angel Gabriel or Archangel Michael or whoever. He could send Michael. He could send angels to go like fight crime and shit. You know what I mean? I don't know. But yeah, I just don't get it. Like we could live in a world where we make decisions, and if you just make like a grotesque, really bad decision, God sends an angel or something like he sends a police officer to stop you. The same way, like if I were to go rob a bank right now, police officers would stop me. I don't think this gets rid of free will at all. So I don't understand why that can't just be the reality where, yeah, before heinous things happen, like some intervention happens. Yeah, it's really that simple. So yeah, that's something. So free will. So the Christian apologist saying just like free will, it just doesn't make any sense. And then the other apologetic will be like, well, evil's in the world because like we messed up, like humanity messed up, or like Adam and Eve messed up. The first problem with this is it has to appeal to a real, like literal Adam and Eve, which can be like demonstrably proven false and not even possible. Christian biologists, even biased Christian biologists, will say they don't believe in like a literal Adam and Eve. Yeah, there's just no way that's real. It's not that like evolution and science disprove like a general version of God, but evolution and science do disprove like a creationist kind of view of God and like the Genesis kind of version of God. That does get disproven. That is disproven. And the other thing too about Adam and Eve, like if you believe in that doctrine and original sin doctrine, original sin, I don't understand how this is possibly like a just system. Original sin is like, I hate to say, like, I don't want to say, I don't know if objectively is the right word, but it's like objectively unjust. Like in any sense of justice, like original sin is the most unjust thing ever. How does it make sense what two humans did? Like, I get they, in their nature, it's not really about what they did. It's about like the spiritual aspect of what they did, right? They disobeyed God. They went against God and stuff. And therefore now thousands of years, generations after them, they suffer with like child pain and just general evil in the world. That's why people say there's evil in the world, is because like Eve and Adam like introduced it. But any other situation, you would say this is unjust. Like, does it make sense? Let's say, like, again, like robbing a bank or whatever. Like, I rob a bank. Does it make any sense for my great-great-great-great-grandchild to suffer for that? Should he serve, like, a jail sentence for what I did? No, it doesn't make any sense. That judge would be like, everyone would call that judge crazy. This simply just isn't fair. Original sin just is, by definition, not a fair concept. So that's not a sufficient answer for me when talking about why there's evil in the world. It can't possibly be because of Adam and Eve. All right, yeah. And so that's kind of that. We're definitely wrapping up. And all of this, and by the way, to say all this, like a caveat for everything, is just like, it seems unlikely. Maybe God is real. Maybe God is evil. There's the evil God hypothesis. You know, maybe that would make sense. That would actually make a lot of sense. If the God of this world was just like straight up evil, okay, I can get with that. But if we're working with the premise and the notion of a just, good, all-knowing God or whatever, you know what I mean? I find it unlikely that we would be in the reality that we are now. It's unlikely to me that we would then see unnecessary suffering and unjust suffering, essentially, is kind of my position. So, yeah, I think that's everything. There's so much I could touch on. There's so many more things to go in on, but that's why we got a YouTube channel, so I'm going to go in on. There's so many specific things I could go on a tangent about. But yeah, we're going to wrap it there, I think. So summary, just like the Bible, pretty much I see a lot of flaws, contradictions, a lot of very unethical things to any standard of like human well-being or anything. The number two, the reality we find ourselves in has a lot of injustice and unnecessary suffering, and there's no intervention from God to kind of balance this out, essentially. And that's me. If you're a Christian, leave your thoughts below. If you have an answer you think, let's talk it out. I probably forgot some things in my like responses, so I can like try to respond to like specific things in the comments. And let's get it. All right. Thanks for watching. Peace out.